Two Men, One Message. Let's just talk about how this book actually got started. Mr. Trump, can you tell me why you suggested writing this book together?
Well, I've been a big fan of Robert's and of Rich Dad for so long. I've seen it, I've read it, everybody I know has read it, and he's just a very special man who I wanted to do something with. And we were making a speech together, and I listened to his speech, I liked it. He listened to my speech, I assume he liked it. You'd have to ask him, but I assume he liked it. And one day, after one of our speeches in front of a tremendous crowd of people, 61,500 people, he came up to me and he said, we ought to do something together. And I've had lots of #1 bestsellers, and he's had lots of #1 bestsellers, and we're just putting it all together.
Mr. Kiyosaki, how did you feel when Mr. Trump asked you to write this book with him?
Well, he's right. When I listen to his talk, he always talks about think big. And when we said let's write a book together, I had to think big, and that's what I had. It was beyond reality at that moment. So I thank him for, sharing his celebrity with me.
Beyond reality television.
Yeah.
Mr. Trump, are you afraid of failing?
I'm not afraid of failing. Life, you look and you turn on the newscasts every night and you see thousands of people killed in earthquakes and tsunamis and hurricanes and all of the problems and wars that we shouldn't even be in, and lots of different things. And when you see all of the problems in the world, what is there to be afraid of? It doesn't matter. To a certain extent, it all doesn't matter. And I tell people that because it takes pressure off. If it matters too much, they're going to be like basket cases. It really doesn't matter. You want to enjoy what you do. You want to do a great job for yourself and your family. But ultimately, in the scope of things, what really matters? And that does take a certain amount of pressure off. And I'm not sure that Robert agrees with my statement, but I see people, they're so intent on doing something, and it's so scary, and they can't even function properly because it's so important to them. And sometimes you say to yourself, it doesn't matter if it works, if it doesn't work. And that takes that real big, high level of pressure off, and you can perform better.
My answer to that is I think what we have in common also is we both went to military schools. Yeah. And military school is about discipline, about being bigger, about following orders, about leading. But what else we have in common is that we both failed. And he lost nearly $1 billion.
I lost a lot of money.
A lot of money.
But it was paper.
And I lost only lost $1 million. And I think what makes us better is when you wrote your book, The Art of the Deal, I was so impressed. But when you wrote The Art of the Comeback, and what it meant to come back from being down so far. And most people are terrified of losing $100, and here you're down $1 billion.
Billions.
And you come back. And I think that's what we have in common is once you've faced that much what everybody's afraid of, you're not as afraid anymore. I think that's really the difference. And for me personally, it was the best education I could have gotten was to find out where I made all my mistakes and rebuild my company.
You wouldn't want to do it again, but
No.
it was a great education.
But when I read Art of the Comeback, I said, this is a big man. That's when my respect for him grew, because Art of the Deal, he's telling about his successes. But when he wrote Art of the Comeback, that's when you grew in my eyes, is because most people will not admit their mistakes. Isn't that true?
Well, and also things happen. I mean, the market's changed. We had a real estate catastrophe in the early 90s, and a lot of very smart people that did a very good job got wiped out. And, I was a very hard fighter. Many of my friends went bankrupt. I never did, but they went bankrupt and out of business. And literally, some of them I've never heard from again. I've tried contacting them. They don't even want to contact because the fact is they feel horrible, and that was many years ago. But I fought very hard, never went bankrupt, made deals with banks, made all sorts of things. And in a certain way, I had a great time doing it, as crazy as it sounds. But you learn a lot about yourself through adversity.
So a lot of the book is defining moments.
Yeah.
And then, what did you learn in military school? Because we have so many men and women in the service today. And wouldn't you say military school or military training is great for business?
Well, I loved it. I also found out it probably wasn't for me, but I loved it, and I did well in that system. I had to adjust to that system. I had a drill sergeant named Major DeBias, who was a really tough guy, and you couldn't get away with the wise guy cracks that you could make to other people. I mean, this guy used to come at you, and it wasn't like it is today, where if somebody whacks you in the face, they end up being thrown in jail for the rest of their life. Those guys were rough, and they would really punch you around, and I'm not advocating it, but I'll tell you something. You'll learn a lot better than you do nowadays, where the teachers are afraid to raise their voice to the students because they'll be thrown out of school. They get thrown out of school easier than the students get thrown out.
I totally agree.
A lot of interesting things I think Robert and I learned at a military academy. I learned the military wasn't necessarily for me, but I have great respect for the military.
The military did things my parents were not willing to do. And I think that's the biggest difference. And I was 6 years in the Marine Corps after that, because it took me longer to get the lesson. But I learned the biggest lesson of all is how to overcome fear. So all these guys in Iraq and all this, they're going to come back. You know, it's a terrible experience, but I think all of them will come back stronger and better for it if they don't let the experience beat them. Because a lot of the Vietnam guys, a lot of them, the experience beat them. But for me, it was I beat the terribleness of it. And I think that's what gives us the strength in business today. And, that's a defining moment in my life.
Well, let's talk about money a little bit. There are those who say that money doesn't bring happiness, or that money doesn't make you happy. I mean, is that true?
Well, I think it's true, but it certainly makes life a lot easier. If you can educate your children, if you can not have to worry about being able to afford a doctor when somebody's not feeling well in the family, it certainly makes life a lot easier. And I don't use the word happy, I use the word content. I think you're more content. And money ultimately, beyond a certain point, is just a scorecard. But you sort of love it. I mean, it's what we do.
It's a game, isn't it?
It is a game. It's a game. Ultimately, it's a game. You play the game. You want to play the game well. You don't like to lose.
Keep score.
It's a scorecard.
Is it easier to become rich today than it was 30 years ago?
I'd say so. The internet and the communications are easier, and the leverage is easier. There's more ways of making money. But let me say this about people who say, that money doesn't make you happy. I've been without money, and anybody who says money doesn't make you happy obviously hasn't been broke yet, or that somebody gave them the money. Because when I didn't have money, Kim and I, it's our 20th anniversary this year, and when we didn't have money, we fought more. And we're a lot happier. It's a game. We keep score. We enjoy it. And as Donald says, if you're doing what you love, that's it. If you're working at something you don't love for money, that's misery. I mean, that's as good as going to hell, as far as I'm concerned.
Mr. Trump, do you think anybody can be rich?
No, I don't think anybody can get rich. I think, unfortunately, the world is not a fair place. I think you have to be born with a certain intelligence. And it doesn't have to be a super intelligence. It has to be a certain intelligence. You can't take somebody that's not a smart person and say, by the way, this is what you do, and here's your little card, and you're going to follow these rules and regulations, and you're going to become a rich person. The world is not fair. They come with this statement, all men are created equal. Well, it sounds beautiful, and it was written by some very wonderful people and brilliant people, but it's not true, because all people and all men aren't created. Now, today, they'd say all men and women. Of course, they would have changed that statement that was made many years ago. But the fact is, you have to be born and blessed with something up here. On the assumption you can become very rich.
And that's what the book is about, is that if you can't get rich in America, you can't get rich anywhere. I would say this is the easiest country. It's not that it's easier, but as a country, it's really designed for capitalists. It's designed for people who want to be rich. And that's our concern right now, is that I think life has gotten somewhat too easy for some people. And too many people have the entitlement mentality, rich or poor. Mm-hmm. They expect the government to take care of them. And our concern is that I think our problems today is globalization. Our government cannot protect us from the world today. I mean, the government cannot stop higher oil prices, or they cannot stop China from getting stronger and all this. So now today, the average person is competing for a job with somebody in India or the Philippines or Ireland. So it is a different world today, although it is easier to get rich. But if you have a complacent attitude, I think it's a tough world right now.
I probably disagree with Robert on one thing. I think the government can do a lot about oil prices. I think they could really drive the prices down a lot. And I think the oil-producing states are getting away with murder, and I think oil companies are getting away with murder. And lots of people having to do with energy are getting away with murder. So I really feel our government could be much more proactive in that. But there are many things that the government cannot do well.
Well, Donald and I were very blessed that we both had rich dads. My best friend's father was my rich dad. And financial education is more important than ever before. So I thank you for viewing this, and I wish you all the best of luck.